In America's picture-perfect neighborhoods, people tend to think the worst thing that could happen is overgrown grass or a trash bin left out past pickup day. But sometimes the scariest thing isn't the untrimmed lawn. It's the person who believes they own the entire neighborhood just because they wear a HOA name badge. I used to think I was just the victim of one bad morning. A Tesla mistaken for someone else's. A nosy neighbor called the police claiming my car was hers, but I was wrong, because that wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system gone unchecked. And what made me stand up wasn't the false accusation. It was realizing this whole street had been bowing its head for far too long, and it was time we got our voice back. I hadn't even finished locking my garage when she appeared, arms crossed, shoulders high, eyes sharp as glass like I'd just stolen her dog. And before I could say good morning or even ask, "Can I help you?" she pointed straight at my brand new Tesla and said, in a voice I will never forget, "That's my car. What are you doing with it?" Her name was Connie Beckman, self-proclaimed founding member of the Elmridge Heights HOA committee. Me? I just moved in 6 months ago, looking for a peaceful life after 30 years in aerospace engineering. Turns out that piece was bait, and I was walking straight into the nightmare. I froze, keys still in my hand. My brain is struggling to process what I had just heard. That Tesla Model 3? It was mine, registered in my name, paid for in full. I bought it as a retirement gift to myself. A small declaration that I still had control over my life, but to Connie, logic didn't apply. Not answering? "You're silent because you know you're guilty, aren't you?" she snapped, then pulled out her phone and called the police right in front of me, as if I were mid-carjacking in broad daylight. 111. Yes, I need to report a stolen vehicle. A white Tesla. The thief is still here, standing right in front of me. Yes, he's trying to leave. I stood there stunned. In all my years of work and life, I'd met all kinds of eccentric people. But I had never seen someone fabricate a car theft right in someone else's driveway, with half the neighborhood watching from their windows. I took a deep breath. Reason whispered, "Don't raise your voice. Don't escalate. Stay calm." But inside, I was boiling. Not because she accused me, but because of how she screamed, like she knew she was right, and the entire block should follow her lead. I spoke, evenly. "That's my car, ma'am. I have all the paperwork. Bought it 3 months ago." She didn't even blink. Instead, she turned back to yell into the phone, "He's saying exactly what a thief would say. I know this car. It has custom features. I recognized it instantly. It belongs to my nephew." I almost laughed. My car was stock from the factory. Not a single custom detail. That's when I realized this wasn't going away easily. She didn't want reason. She wanted an audience. And she had one now. Neighbors peeking through curtains, whispering, definitely crafting their version of the Connie story. Quietly, I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and began recording everything. Not to fight back, but because I knew, with someone like this, evidence is your only lifeline, and I was right. This story was far from over. I kept recording. Not because I thought it would calm her down, but because something told me this woman didn't just act out of impulse. She acted out of habit. A woman like Connie Beckman didn't wake up one morning and decide to accuse a neighbor of grand theft auto. No, this was rehearsed. She thrived on attention, on control. As she marched up and down my driveway like she owned the place, still barking into her phone, I noticed something else. She kept glancing toward the homes across the street. She wanted them to see. She wanted them to hear. This wasn't about the car. This was about power, and in her mind, I had stepped out of line. You see, I wasn't the type of new neighbor she expected. I didn't come over with cookies. I didn't ask for advice about lawn edging or where to buy mulch. I moved in quietly, minded my business, kept my yard clean, and didn't show up to the monthly HOA potluck. Apparently, that made me suspicious. So, here she was screaming into the phone, making wild claims that my brand new Tesla was her cousin's old car, that I'd stolen it and was preparing to flee. She pointed to the license plate, the VIN, even the side mirrors, said they looked identical to one she had seen at a wedding last year. It would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. I stayed calm. That's the one thing. The Navy drilled into me back in the day. Don't escalate, observe, stay sharp. And in this case, it was working, because the more I stayed grounded, the more unhinged she became. And boy, did she double down. She's got the wrong guy, I told myself. This'll be over in 5 minutes once the cops show up. That's what I thought. But when the first patrol car rolled up, lights flashing, engine humming, I saw something change in her face. Not fear, not panic. Satisfaction. She waved them down like she'd just captured a fugitive. "Officer," she yelled, running up to the passenger side. "That's the thief. He's trying to drive off with my cousin's car. You have to stop." "Him!" The officer stepped out, cool and collected, probably used to HOA drama by now. He walked up to me while his partner stayed near Connie, taking her statement. "Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle." I didn't resist. Didn't argue. Just said, "Of course, officer. Would you like to see the registration? Title? Insurance? I have it all right here." He nodded. Professional, but cautious. Meanwhile, Connie was still going off like a fire, alarm in human form. "I recognize that car. It has a scratch on the bumper just like the one my cousin had. Check the bumper. You'll see I'm right." I unlocked the glove box and handed the officer the documents. He looked at them, then at me, then back at Connie. "Ma'am," he called out, "this vehicle is registered to Mr. Grant Emerson, purchased 3 months ago new from a dealership in Phoenix, and you'd think that would be the end of it, but not with Connie." She hissed, yes, actually hissed, and stomped back toward the sidewalk. That doesn't mean anything. Thieves register cars all the time under fake names. I could see the officer biting his tongue. "Ma'am, that's a serious accusation," he warned. "Unless you have evidence this car was stolen, I suggest you stop interfering." That only made her louder. She launched into a rant about entitled new residents, about how people like me don't respect HOA rules, and how she'd warned the board this would happen. She was unraveling, fast, and now the crowd of neighbors had grown. Phones were out, people were recording, and for the first time, the neighborhood wasn't just watching, they were judging. Her. I looked around. A few gave me nods. One man even mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded back. But the damage had already been done. My morning was shot, my sense of peace shattered. All because one woman couldn't stand the sight of a man she couldn't control. Eventually, the second officer stepped in. He asked her calmly but firmly to stop making claims without proof. And when she refused, kept interrupting, kept shouting, he asked for her ID. She refused again. That's when they warned her she was obstructing a police investigation. You could see the shift in the crowd. This wasn't just an HOA squabble anymore. This was a public humiliation. And the worst part? It wasn't over, not even close. By now, every porch light on the street was on, and it wasn't even noon. Connie Beckman was standing in the middle of my driveway, arms flailing, voice hoarse from yelling at both officers. And here I was, the so-called thief, just calmly leaning against my fence with my arms crossed, watching this woman bury herself deeper by the minute. The officers had already confirmed everything. The Tesla was mine. The registration matched. The insurance matched. Heck, even the loan payoff confirmation was still folded in my glove box. But Connie wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. "You think a few papers mean anything?" she snapped at Officer Collins, the taller one who had taken the lead. "What if he forged them? You people are just going to take his word over mine?" That's when Officer Collins stepped forward, his patience clearly thinning. "Ma'am, unless you can provide any evidence that this vehicle was stolen or that you have any legal claim to it, I'm going to have to ask you to step off this property and stop interfering." That word, property, set her off. Her face twisted like she'd just been slapped with a glove. "This isn't his property. This entire neighborhood is governed by HOA rules. That includes driveways." I couldn't help it. I let out a laugh. It wasn't mocking, just stunned disbelief. "Lady," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm, "I've read the bylaws. This driveway was poured before the HOA was even formed. You don't control it. You don't control me. And you sure as hell don't control this car. Her head snapped toward me like a hawk spotting prey. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed. Moving in here, parking your fancy toy like it makes you better than everyone else. I've lived here for 21 years. I know this place. I built this place. That's when Officer Collins cut in. Ma'am, last warning. You're now trespassing. This homeowner has asked you to leave his driveway. If you refuse, we'll take further action. And like any HOA tyrant who doesn't think rules apply to her, she doubled down. No, he should leave. He doesn't belong here. I demand the keys to that car until this is sorted. You read that right. She actually said, I demand the keys. Like she was issuing some kind of royal decree from a lawn chair throne. The silence after that was almost comedic. Even her supporters, the handful of neighbors who used to wave at her HOA clipboards, looked away. That's when Officer Reeves stepped forward and reached for his handcuffs. Ma'am, you're under arrest for obstruction and disorderly conduct. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. It was like watching a tower collapse in slow motion. Her mouth dropped open. Her feet didn't move. For a second, I thought she'd faint. But instead, she screamed. You're arresting. Me? I'm the victim here. I'm the one protecting this neighborhood. But it was too late. The cuffs clicked shut, and she walked down my driveway like every rule she'd ever weaponized had just come back to bite her. And let me tell you something. It felt good. Not because I wanted revenge, but because justice, real, simple, legal justice here, had finally arrived. As the officers read her rights, she kept shouting over them, This isn't over. I'll sue. I'll call the board. You're all going to regret this. And I just stood there, calm, still holding the same car key she tried to steal with her voice. The moment the squad car pulled away, something amazing happened. The neighbors who'd been watching quietly, they started clapping. Some of them even walked over. A woman I'd never spoken to before, Diane, from 2 doors down, shook her head and said, We've all dealt with her for years. Thank you for standing your ground. An older man nodded. She once threatened to fine me $200 for having a wind chime. A wind chime. I realized then, this wasn't just about me. Connie had been terrorizing this street for years, but no one had ever stood up to her. Not until now. And somehow, all it took was a car key and a camera. 3 days after Connie was arrested in my driveway, I got a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't from the police. It wasn't even from Connie. It was from the HOA board, the same crew of clipboard warriors and self-declared neighborhood guardians that Connie used to strut around with like a pack of mall cops. The letter was typed, formal, and filled with passive-aggressive language like, In light of the recent misunderstanding involving one of our long-standing HOA members, the board has decided to hold an emergency meeting to address community concerns regarding vehicle ownership, driveway usage, and neighborhood decorum. In other words, they wanted to save face. Connie was their queen bee. And now that she'd been walking off my property in handcuffs, the hive was scrambling to protect the hive mind. So they scheduled the meeting for Saturday, 7 p.m. sharp, in the community clubhouse, a room that smelled like old coffee and generational denial, and I showed up early, but I didn't come alone. I brought a stack of evidence, my Tesla registration, dealership invoice, security camera footage, and even a copy of the HOA bylaws with all the relevant sections highlighted in neon yellow. I wasn't going to play defense. I came to end this. As I walked in, I noticed the room was fuller than usual. Normally, these HOA meetings only attract 10 or 15 people, mostly retirees debating lawn heights and which mailbox paint qualifies as neutral beige. But tonight, it was standing room only. Word had gotten around. Connie wasn't there, of course. She was reportedly taking a step back from public duties. Translation, her lawyer told her to shut up. But her cronies were there. Ron from Lot 14, the one who always wears sunglasses indoors. Denise from the landscaping subcommittee, who thinks planting lavender counts as climate activism. And of course, HOA President Ed Mallory, a man who'd never met a sentence he couldn't drown in legal jargon. He opened the meeting with a deep sigh. "We are here," he began, "to address a matter that has unfortunately drawn attention far beyond our peaceful community." Peaceful? I almost laughed out loud, but I let him talk. He rambled about civility and miscommunication, carefully avoiding the words arrest, false accusation, or abuse of authority, as if the whole thing had just been a misunderstanding. Over a borrowed lawnmower. Then he opened the floor. "Mr. Emerson," he said, gesturing to me with a forced smile, "would you like to share your perspective?" I stood up, calm, clear, direct. "Sure," I said. "I'd love to." And then I unloaded, not with anger, not with shouting, but with facts. Hard, irrefutable, on-paper truth. I walked them through the timeline. How Connie accused me of stealing my own car, how she called the cops and made a false report, how she demanded the keys like she was the sheriff of this subdivision. Then I held up my registration. Here's my name. Here's the VIN. Purchased 3 months ago, full documentation. Then the video. I cast it to the projector screen they had for PowerPoints. There she was, full volume, full delusion, demanding the keys and yelling at law enforcement. No edits, no tricks, just reality. The room was dead silent. Even Ron took off his sunglasses. When the clip ended, I turned back to the board. "And now, here's the part I really want to talk about," I said. "This HOA sent me a letter framing this incident as a misunderstanding. Not once did it mention that a homeowner was falsely accused, harassed, and publicly humiliated. You called a meeting to preserve your image, but where's the accountability?" Ed Mallory cleared his throat. "Mr. Emerson, I assure you, I cut him off. "No, Ed, you don't assure me, you assure her. You've let this woman run around policing people with made-up rules for years. I've heard from over a dozen neighbors since this happened. All of them afraid to speak up. Well, I'm not afraid. Not anymore." People clapped. Not a thunderous standing ovation, but real, sincere, fed-up applause. The kind that said, "Finally, someone said it." I turned to the rest of the room. If this HOA wants to survive, legally, ethically, you better start acting like a board, not a social club with clipboards. Because I guarantee you, the next time someone comes after me with fake authority, it won't just end in a meeting, it'll end in court. And with that, I sat down. No mic drop, no dramatic exit, just silence. Then Ed sighed again and said, "Duly noted." Damn right it was. The Monday after the emergency meeting, something in the neighborhood felt different. For the first time since I moved into Elmridge Heights, people weren't avoiding eye contact. They weren't peeking from behind their curtains or giving me the polite half-wave followed by a quick retreat. No. Now they were walking over, talking, asking questions, and they weren't whispering about Connie Beckman anymore. They were whispering about change. It started with Diane, the woman who'd spoken to me after Connie's arrest. She showed up at my door with a tray of coffee cake and a thick manila folder. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, eyes sharp. "It's everything I've collected over the years. HOA letters, fines, threats, all from Connie, or the board she ran." Inside were dozens of notices, some hand-signed by Connie herself, for things as absurd as bird feeders exceeding volume guidelines, or garage doors left open more than 5 minutes after use. I wasn't even sure that was enforceable under any real law. Diane smiled. "I was too scared to say anything back then, but after what you did at that meeting," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. By Wednesday, 3 more neighbors had come forward, each with similar stories. One man was fined for overgrown front grass, even though his lawn service had just mowed it the day prior. Another was told he had to repaint his shutters because the color no longer matched the evolving community palette. It wasn't just power abuse, it was harassment disguised as governance. And all roads lead back to Connie. See? Connie. Beckman hadn't just been a board member, she'd been the unofficial queen of Elmridge Heights for over a decade. She knew everyone's routines, their kids' names, where they parked, what they planted, and how long their trash bins sat on the curb. And if you didn't play by her unspoken rules, you got the clipboard, you got the fines, you got the whispers. But now the spell was broken. By Friday, someone had posted flyers around the community entrance, big, bold letters, calling for a vote to remove board members. Your voice matters. And just like that, the HOA board, once Connie's playground, started to fracture. I started getting emails, calls, strangers thanking me, asking if I'd consider getting involved. They wanted leadership that didn't stock driveways or monitor mailbox decor. I'll be honest, I didn't move here to lead a revolution. I bought a house in this quiet suburb because I thought I was done with battles, done with politics. I wanted clean streets, friendly hellos, and a chance to slow down. But apparently, HOA tyranny doesn't care if you're retired. So I showed up to the next monthly meeting. This time, the room was packed, standing room only, folding chairs, lining the back wall, people who hadn't attended a single board discussion in years. And they weren't there for donuts. They were there for answers. Ed Mallory, the HOA president, looked like a man sitting on a lit powder keg. You could see the sweat on his brow as he shuffled papers he didn't even read when the agenda item for community grievances came up. It was like opening floodgates. One by one, neighbors stepped up. Diane talked about being threatened with fines for wind chimes. Mr. Alvarez recounted how his autistic son's swing set had been ordered removed for violating visual uniformity. A woman named Patricia described how she was fined twice for a non-standard front porch chair, one her husband used to sit in before he passed away. None of these stories had ever been shared in public, until now. Then came the kicker. Someone had filed a formal petition to recall 3 sitting HOA board members, including Ed himself. And guess what? The signatures had surpassed the threshold. Ed tried to remain calm, but the pressure was unbearable. You could see it in his hands, shaking. You could hear it in his voice, cracking. It's important we remember the value of structure, he stammered. Without order, there's chaos. No, someone cut in. Without abuse, there's freedom. And the room erupted in applause. It was the sound of people taking back their voice, taking back their homes. I stayed quiet most of that meeting. I didn't need to say anything. The momentum had shifted, not because of me, but because everyone finally realized they weren't alone. I didn't break the dam, I just struck the first crack. It had been 3 quiet weeks, too quiet. The flyers were gone. The recall vote was scheduled. Conversations around the mailbox had turned from HOA paranoia to lawn care tips and weekend cookouts. The neighborhood felt like it had finally taken a deep breath after a 10-year chokehold. But like any control freak with a bruised ego and no self-awareness, Connie Beckman wasn't done. She just needed time to regroup, and regroup she did. It started with rumors, whisper campaigns. I heard from Diane that Connie had begun calling some of the older residents, painting herself as the victim of a smear job. According to her, she hadn't demanded the keys. She had been concerned about a suspicious vehicle and trying to protect the community. Protect it from what? My clean driveway? Then came the letter. An actual HOA-wide mailer, slick and glossy, printed like a political ad. No return address, no official board stamp, just a photograph of Connie smiling in front of a flagpole with bold letters across the top. Let's restore order. She accused me, without naming me, of disrupting community balance, weaponizing division, and undermining years of dedicated service. I laughed so hard when I read it, I almost spilled my coffee. But it wasn't funny, because beneath the delusion was something more dangerous: desperation. Connie had tasted power for too long to let go without a final fight, and like any tyrant on the verge of collapse, she reached for the only tool she had left: fear. So when I heard she was planning to show up to the next HOA meeting, the one where the recall vote was set to be finalized, I knew exactly what she was going to do. Connie didn't come to concede. She came to retake the crown. That night, the clubhouse was more packed than ever. People had folding chairs out in the hallway. Some were even standing outside with their phones live streaming through the windows. This wasn't a neighborhood meeting anymore. This was Judgment Day. Ed Mallory, who looked like he hadn't slept in days, opened with the usual formality. Then he paused. "Before we move forward with the recall vote," he said, adjusting his glasses, "Mrs. Connie Beckman has requested to make a statement." You could feel the temperature drop in the room. She walked in like a ghost. Same posture, same scarf tied tight around her neck, same smug half-smile she used when she handed out citations like Halloween candy. But something had changed. She wasn't radiating dominance. She was radiating panic dressed up as poise. "Thank you, Ed," she began, her voice sweet as poison. "I'd like to start by saying I have always acted with the best interest of this community at heart. I may have made mistakes, we all do, but I refuse to let outsiders destroy what we've built." Outsiders. That was aimed at me. She kept talking, painting herself as the tireless guardian, the misunderstood figurehead. She claimed her arrest was a misunderstanding and that the footage circulating online was edited to cause outrage. Then, she dropped the final card. "I believe it is in the community's interest to delay the recall vote until a formal investigation can be conducted into the recent events." Gasps, murmurs. A couple people nodded, uncertain. I stood up, not angry.
"Just steady, may I respond?"
I asked. Ed, now looking like a man caught in a lightning storm with no umbrella, nodded slowly. I turned toward the room. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," I began. "I thought the evidence spoke for itself. But since Mrs. Beckman insists on rewriting history, let me remind you of the facts. I listed them clearly. My Tesla, bought with cash, registered in my name, her public 911 call. On video. Lying to the police, she yelled at officers, demanding the keys, her arrest, documented, recorded, and witnessed by 20 neighbors. And now she wants to call me the outsider? I've never written a fine. Never demanded a vote be silenced. Never used a clipboard to intimidate families over lawn chairs." I turned to Connie directly. "You want to talk about outsiders? You've made half this neighborhood feel like strangers in their own homes." Dead silence. I looked back at the room. "If we delay this vote tonight, we're not giving her another chance, and we're surrendering. And I didn't stand my ground so we could go back to business as usual." That's when Diane stood up. Then Mr. Alvarez, then Patricia. People who'd never spoken at meetings were now standing behind me, literally and figuratively, and that was it. The dam broke again. The board voted, and by a landslide, they proceeded with the recall. Ed, Ron, and Denise were officially removed, and Connie? Connie stormed out without a word. No clipboard, no crown, just the sound of her heels echoing down a hallway she used to rule. After Connie Beckman stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door hard enough to shake the American flag in the corner, the room stayed quiet for a long minute. No one cheered, no one clapped, we all just sat there, stunned. It wasn't just the fall of a tyrant. It was the sudden vacuum she left behind. After years of micromanagement, clipboard threats, and HOA fines that felt more like revenge than regulation, the silence felt unreal, but it didn't last. By the time I got home, my porch light was flickering with the warm buzz of neighborly energy. Diane waved from her driveway. Mr. Alvarez handed me a cold beer. Someone even left a card in my mailbox that just said, "Thank you for standing up." I finally sat down that night, kicked off my boots, and exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding since the day I moved in. But then I noticed it, tucked under my windshield wiper, fluttering in the evening breeze and a single sheet of paper. I pulled it out. It wasn't angry, wasn't threatening. It wasn't even addressed to me. In fact, it looked like one of those HOA meeting handouts, except it had Connie's handwriting scribbled along the margins in bold, looping pen. At first, I thought it was trash, something she dropped in her dramatic exit, but curiosity got the better of me. I took it inside, laid it flat on the kitchen counter, and read every word. That's when I found it, buried in her notes, half-sentence scribbles, angry arrows, bullet points like reclaim authority and public sympathy. Push, there was one line that stopped me cold. EV charging rule, Implement limit on all non-HOA approved homes. I stared at it. It didn't make sense. Not at first. But then I remembered. 3 weeks ago, right before she accused me of stealing my own Tesla, there had been a rumor going around about an HOA proposal to restrict home EV chargers. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. It sounded ridiculous even for Connie. But now I understand. It had never been about my car. It had been about power. Literally. I dug through my inbox, found the archived HOA email thread I almost deleted, and sure enough, there it was. A draft proposal to regulate private EV chargers installed without prior board approval. That proposal had never passed, but Connie had already decided who could charge and who couldn't, and she saw my Tesla as a threat. Not because it was fancy, not because it was new, but because it represented something she couldn't control. She wanted to dictate how people charged their cars, what brands they drove, maybe even where they parked. And when I pulled into this neighborhood with a brand new EV and zero permission, slips signed, she saw red. This wasn't about property values. This was about a woman losing her grip on a kingdom she'd built one rule at a time. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't over, because people like Connie don't just walk away. They regroup. They file complaints. They wait for moments of distraction. They use shadows when they lose the spotlight. So I made a decision. I scanned the document. Every note, every line, every scribble, and I emailed it straight to the interim board, including Ed's replacement, a level-headed woman named Joyce who had quietly fought Connie's overreach for years. Then I took it one step further. I called the state HOA regulatory division because Connie hadn't just abused her neighbors. She had attempted to illegally create regulations without board approval, draft policies that never passed, and enforce fines based on personal vendettas. That's a violation of state law. Joyce called me the next morning. We've turned everything over to the compliance review team, she said. And Grant, you may have just cracked this whole thing wide open. Apparently, Connie's behavior wasn't just HOA tyranny. It bordered on fraud, and that meant the story wasn't closing. It was just reaching its real climax. The message from Joyce came at 6:42 a.m. on a Thursday. Just 3 words. It's starting. I didn't need to ask what she meant. I knew exactly. 3 weeks after that fateful meeting and the misplaced note Connie left behind, I had sent everything to the state authorities. Scanned documents, photos, old meeting records, even emails from residents who'd been fined based on rules that didn't actually exist. I didn't expect much. Everyone knows HOA laws are usually full of loopholes, easy to dodge, pass blame, or twist around, but this time was different. Because Connie hadn't just broken civil rules, she signed falsified documents. Around 8 a.m., I heard an unfamiliar sound outside. Not the mail truck, not a lawnmower. It was the sound of government-issued tires rolling over brick pavement. I stepped out onto the porch. 3 black SUVs parked in front of Connie's house. 1 local police car. 2 individuals in jackets marked State HOA Oversight Division. 1 of them knocked on the door. No answer. The second didn't knock. He held up a warrant and nodded to the police to open the gate. The door Connie Beckman hand repainted 3 times for failing HOA aesthetic standards was now opened by real authority, the law. She stepped out, still in her scarf and velvet coat, but the commanding presence was gone. Her eyes darted, searching for someone to defend her. But the neighbors no longer looked away. They stood in their yards, eyes steady, silent. The officer read her rights. The state agents listed the violations: document falsification, abuse of HOA authority, and coercion of residents using unapproved internal policies. I stood there, hands in my pockets, not smiling, but lighter than I'd felt in years. Connie looked at me. No fury, no shouting. Only fear, because for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't in control anymore. 2 weeks later, Joyce and I attended the first meeting of the new HOA board. The atmosphere was entirely different. No fine lists, no side-eye glances, no clipboards, bobbing up and down. People sat as equals, discussing flowers, security costs, and playground maintenance. I didn't ask to join the board. I didn't need a title, but I still got pats on the back and quiet thank yous, not because I had won, but because I had stood firm. An older neighbor, Harold, shook my hand and said, "We stayed quiet too long, but because of you, we remembered. The HOA isn't a kingdom, it's a community." That one sentence made everything worth it. Now every time I step onto my porch, I no longer check over my shoulder. I don't brace for warning letters. I don't need HOA approval to park in my own driveway. As for Connie Beckman, she's awaiting trial, facing steep fines, maybe even losing residency in Elmridge Heights. Rumor has it she's selling her house, leaving the state, but that no longer matters. What matters is, we reclaimed the one thing her HOA had stolen from us: peace. Where once there was fear and silence, now there's the laughter of children, the scent of pie drifting from kitchens, and honest waves exchanged between neighbors. No rigid rulebook, no self-declared queen. We don't need someone to control our lives, we just need the space to live them fully.